There was no warmth anymore. No acknowledgement that I had just walked through the door after working 10 hours. No question about how my day had gone. Just another request. Then the criticism started. One evening, I came home exhausted and began making dinner. I had spent the entire afternoon dealing with a difficult project at work, and I had skipped lunch because I needed to finish early enough to pick up Emily's prescription before the pharmacy closed. When I finally got home, I prepared the meal she had requested. She took one bite and frowned. "It's cold." I looked at the plate. "I just made it." "Well, it isn't warm enough." I apologized and put it back in the microwave. Another night, she became upset because I bought the wrong brand of lotion. Another day, she complained because I forgot a particular dessert she had mentioned the previous evening. I started apologizing for things I hadn't even realized I was doing wrong. I told myself Emily was frustrated with her situation, not with me. I repeated that explanation so often that it became automatic. If she was impatient, she was struggling. If she was angry, she was in pain. If she criticized me, she was simply exhausted. I became an expert at making excuses for the person I loved. The problem was that while I was protecting her from the consequences of her behavior, nobody was protecting me from it. My friend Marcus was the first person to say something I didn't want to hear. Marcus had known me since college. He had watched me change after the accident. We used to meet for dinner every Friday. Then it became once a month. Then once every few months. Eventually, he stopped asking because he already knew my answer. One evening, he called and asked if I wanted to grab dinner. I told him I couldn't. Emily needed me at home. There was a pause before Marcus said, "Daniel, when was the last time you did something because you wanted to?" I laughed and told him I didn't have time for that. He replied, "You've been saying that for 3 years." I didn't know what to say. After the call ended, I sat alone in the garage with the lights off. For the first time, I tried to remember what I actually enjoyed doing. I couldn't think of much. I used to play basketball on Sunday mornings. I stopped. I used to meet friends after work. I stopped. I used to read novels before bed. I stopped. I used to take long drives with no destination. I stopped. Almost everything I had once done for myself had disappeared, one small decision at a time. And somehow, I had convinced myself that this was noble instead of recognizing that I was disappearing. Still, I stayed. I loved Emily. Or perhaps more accurately, I loved the woman Emily had been before the accident, and I desperately wanted to believe she was still somewhere beneath all the anger and frustration. I remembered the woman who used to laugh when I burned dinner. The woman who used to leave silly notes in my lunch bag. The woman who would fall asleep on my shoulder during movies. I kept waiting for her to come back. I didn't realize that waiting had become another form of exhaustion. Then came the evening that changed everything. I had finished work earlier than usual. Before going home, I stopped at the grocery store and bought everything Emily had asked for. As I walked through the aisles, I remembered that she had mentioned her favorite cookies earlier that week. I added a box to the cart. It was a small thing, but I smiled because I knew she would be happy to see them. I drove home expecting an ordinary evening. When I opened the front door, the house was quiet. I heard voices coming from the living room. Emily was talking to her sister, Rachel. I smiled when I heard Rachel laugh. I thought about walking into the room and surprising them, but then I heard Rachel say something about how lucky Emily was to have me. I stopped. Emily laughed. It wasn't the tired laugh I had become accustomed to hearing. It was light and relaxed. Then she said, "That's because he basically has to." I stood in the hallway with the grocery bags in my hands. Rachel laughed again. "What do you mean?" Emily answered casually, "He thinks he's being my husband." Then she paused. "But honestly, he's more like my servant." My fingers tightened around the grocery bags. I couldn't move. Rachel said something I couldn't hear. Emily laughed again. "He works all day, comes home, cooks, cleans, takes care of me, runs every errand I ask him to run. He doesn't even have a life anymore." I stared at the wall. 3 years. 3 years of waking up before sunrise. 3 years of medication schedules. 3 years of hospital appointments. 3 years of canceled plans. 3 years of telling myself that love meant sacrifice. 3 years of believing that everything I did mattered. And she had described me with one word: servant. Then Emily said something that hurt even more. "He's so desperate to feel needed that he'll do anything I ask." I looked down at the grocery bags. Her favorite cookies were inside. I had bought them because I knew they made her happy. For the first time, I wondered whether she even saw the love behind the things I did. I didn't walk into the living room. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I simply turned around and walked into the kitchen. I placed every grocery bag on the counter. Then I went upstairs. I changed out of my work clothes and sat on the edge of our bed in silence. I stared at the wall for what felt like an hour. My mind replayed the last 3 years over and over again. Every appointment, every late night, every time I had canceled something, every time I had told someone I couldn't come because Emily needed me. I remembered how proud I had once been of being the person she could depend on. Now I wondered whether I had allowed myself to become invisible. That night, I didn't sleep much. Around 4 in the morning, I finally made a decision. I wasn't going to abandon Emily. I wasn't going to punish her for being disabled. But I was going to stop sacrificing myself to prove that I loved her. There was a difference between being a husband and becoming someone's entire support system without boundaries. The next morning, Emily woke up and pressed the call button beside her bed. Daniel. I heard her from the hallway. For 3 years, I would have rushed in immediately. This time, I stayed where I was for several seconds. Then I walked into the room. Emily looked at me. I need help getting up. I stood near the doorway. You can call the home care service. Her face changed. What? I arranged for someone to come during the day. She stared at me. Since when? Last night. Her eyes narrowed. Why? I looked at her. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't apologize. I think we both need to learn something. She looked confused. What? I took a slow breath. I'm your husband, Emily. I paused. I'm not your servant. Emily stared at me as if I had suddenly started speaking another language. For 3 years, I had been the person who came running whenever she called my name. I had never made her wait. I had never told her to call someone else. I had never said no when she needed something, even when I was exhausted. So when I told her I had arranged for a professional caregiver to come during the day, she looked genuinely shocked. What do you mean, a home care service? She asked. I mean, someone will be here during the hours I'm at work. Her expression hardened. Why? I looked at her for a long moment. I wanted to tell her exactly what I had heard the night before. I wanted to repeat every word. I wanted to ask how 3 years of my life had somehow become servitude in her eyes. But I didn't. Not yet. Because this isn't working anymore, I said. She stared at me. What isn't working? Us. Her eyes widened. You're leaving me? No. Then what are you saying? I'm saying I can't continue living like this. Emily looked genuinely confused. You've been taking care of me for 3 years. I know. And now you're complaining? I didn't say I was complaining. You don't have to. You're acting like I'm some burden. I felt something tighten inside my chest. I never said you were a burden. Then why are you doing this? I took a breath. Because I need a life too. She looked away. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly said, I need you. I know. No, Daniel. You don't understand. I can't do this alone. You don't have to do it alone. She looked back at me. The caregiver will help during the day. We can also arrange physical therapy at home, and if you need additional assistance, I'll make sure we have it. But I don't want a stranger. I understand. I want you. That sentence almost broke me, because 3 years earlier, those were the words I had wanted to hear. But now they didn't feel the same. I'll still be your husband, I said. I'm not disappearing. She stared at me. Then why does this feel like you're abandoning me? Because you're used to me doing everything. Her eyes filled with tears. You're punishing me. No. You heard something. I went silent. Emily's expression changed. You heard me talking to Rachel. I didn't answer. That was enough. She looked away. How much? Enough. Her face turned pale. Daniel, I walked toward the door. I don't want to talk about it right now. Please. I stopped. She swallowed. I didn't mean it like that. I turned around. Then how did you mean it? She couldn't answer. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. I left the room. The caregiver arrived 2 days later. Her name was Linda, and she had worked with patients recovering from spinal injuries for more than a decade. She was calm, professional, patient, and experienced. She didn't treat Emily like a helpless person, but she also didn't pretend Emily didn't need assistance. Most importantly, she didn't have the complicated emotional history that I had developed after 3 years of caregiving. At first, Emily hated having her there. She complained that Linda moved too slowly. Then she complained that Linda asked too many questions. Then she complained that Linda wasn't me. I stayed calm. I think you'll get used to her. I don't want to get used to her. I know. You're enjoying this. I looked at her. No. Then why do you look so calm? Because I'm finally sleeping. That stopped her. For the first time, she noticed the dark circles beneath my eyes. I hadn't realized how exhausted I looked until she stared at me. I didn't know you were that tired, she whispered. I almost laughed. How could you not know? She didn't answer. That evening, I went out with Marcus. It was the first time in almost a year that I had accepted an invitation from him. We met at a small restaurant downtown. Marcus looked at me for several seconds before smiling. You look different. Different how? You're sitting down. I laughed. Very funny. No, seriously. He studied me. You look like Daniel again. I looked down at my plate. I don't know who I am anymore. Marcus became serious. You're finding out. We talked for almost 3 hours. Not about Emily. Not about hospitals. Not about medications. Not about wheelchairs. We talked about work, old friends, stupid college stories, sports, and the things we used to laugh about. For the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to be myself. When I got home, Emily was awake. Where were you? Dinner with Marcus. She looked surprised. You went out? Yes. You didn't tell me. I didn't think I needed permission. She looked away. I wasn't saying that. I know. There was an awkward silence. Then she asked, Did you have fun? I looked at her. Yes. She nodded. Good. It was a small conversation, but something about it felt different. Over the next few weeks, I slowly rebuilt parts of my life that I had abandoned. I started going to the gym twice a week. I met Marcus for dinner. I started reading again. I even took a Saturday afternoon and drove to a lake where Emily and I used to spend time before the accident. I sat there alone for almost an hour. I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt peaceful. That scared me, because I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I had confused guilt with love. I had believed that if I wasn't constantly sacrificing something, then I wasn't loving Emily enough. But love wasn't supposed to erase a person. At home, things became complicated. Emily began trying to do more for herself. At first, she did it because she was angry. Then she did it because she had no choice. Linda encouraged her to regain as much independence as possible. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found Emily preparing her own lunch. It wasn't much. A sandwich, a bowl of fruit, a glass of water. But she had done it herself. She looked at me. I did it. I smiled. I can see that. She seemed almost proud. Then her expression changed. Are you proud of me? Yes. She looked down. I haven't heard you say that in a long time. I didn't know what to say. She had a point. Our marriage had become so focused on survival that we had forgotten how to be partners. But I still couldn't forget what I had heard. A few days later, I came home and found Emily sitting in the living room with Rachel. The moment Rachel saw me, her expression changed. Daniel. Rachel. Emily looked uncomfortable. I walked toward the kitchen. Then Rachel stood. I should go. Emily looked at her. Already? Rachel nodded. She glanced at me. I think we need to talk. I stopped. About what? Rachel hesitated. Then she said, About that night. I looked at Emily. She lowered her eyes. I understood. Rachel followed me into the kitchen. I shouldn't have laughed. No. I was trying to make Emily feel better. By calling me her servant? Rachel looked ashamed. She was angry. So was I. I know. She paused. Daniel, there are things you don't know. I looked at her. What things? Rachel took a breath. Emily didn't always mean what she said. That doesn't make it okay. I know. Then what are you trying to tell me? Rachel looked toward the living room. She doesn't want you to know how scared she is. I frowned. Scared of what? Losing you. I didn't respond. Rachel continued. After the accident, Emily became convinced that eventually you'd leave. She told me that. She didn't just think it. She became obsessed with it. I stared at her. She kept saying that one day you'd realize your life was disappearing because of her. I felt a strange ache in my chest. Then why did she call me a servant? Rachel looked down. Because she was trying to convince herself that she didn't need you emotionally. I didn't understand. She thought if she treated you like an employee, then losing you wouldn't hurt as much. I shook my head. That doesn't excuse what she said. No. Rachel nodded. But it explains it. I looked toward the living room. Emily was watching us. She looked frightened. Rachel walked away. I remained in the kitchen. Emily rolled closer. Did she tell you? Yes. She lowered her eyes. I didn't want you to know. Why? Because I was ashamed. Of what? She took a shaky breath. Of needing you. I sat down across from her. You don't have to be ashamed of needing your husband. I know. Then why did you treat me like I was nothing? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I was terrified. Of what? That one day you'd wake up and realize you had wasted your life on me. I stared at her. You thought I'd resent you? Yes. I never did. I know. Then why didn't you talk to me? She looked away. Because every time I looked at you, I saw everything you'd given up. I swallowed. You could have told me. I didn't know how. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was still furious. But another part finally understood that her cruelty had come from fear. Still, fear didn't erase consequences. I forgive you for being afraid, I said quietly. Emily looked at me. But I don't know if I can forget what you said. She nodded. I don't expect you to. For the first time since the accident, we were talking honestly. Not as caregiver and patient. Not as husband and wife, pretending everything was fine. Just two people who had both been hurting in different ways. I thought that conversation might be the beginning of repairing our marriage. I was wrong, because 3 days later, I received an email from Emily's doctor. The subject line contained only 4 words. We need to talk. I opened it. The message was short. He asked me to come to the hospital without Emily. And at the bottom, he wrote something that made my stomach drop. There is something about Emily's recovery that she hasn't told you. The next morning, I barely slept. The email from Emily's doctor kept replaying in my mind. There is something about Emily's recovery that she hasn't told you. Those words were impossible to ignore. For 3 years, I had accepted everything the doctors told us. Emily had suffered a spinal cord injury. Her recovery had been slow. She needed assistance. There was uncertainty about whether she would ever walk again. I had never questioned any of it because questioning it felt like questioning her. But now her own doctor had asked me to come alone. That meant there was something serious enough that he didn't want Emily present. I arrived at the hospital shortly after 9 in the morning. The familiar smell of disinfectant immediately brought back memories of the first terrible weeks after Emily's accident. I walked through the same corridors where I had once spent countless nights sleeping in uncomfortable chairs. When I reached Dr. Harris's office, his assistant told me he was waiting. I knocked and entered. Dr. Harris stood behind his desk, holding a file in his hands. He looked at me for several seconds before asking me to sit down. I sat, but my body remained tense. Daniel, he said carefully, before we talk, I need you to understand something. What? Everything I'm about to tell you is based on Emily's medical records and conversations we've had over the past several months. I stared at him. Okay. He placed the file on the desk. Emily's physical condition may not be exactly what you believe it is. My heart started pounding. What does that mean? He opened the file. Her spinal injury was severe, but not complete. I frowned. I know. No, he said. I don't think you do. He showed me several medical reports. Emily has retained significantly more neurological function than we originally expected. I stared at the papers. Then why hasn't she improved? Dr. Harris took a breath. That's what we've been trying to understand. My mouth went dry. Are you saying she could walk? I am saying there is a possibility. I sat completely still. For 3 years, I had believed that Emily couldn't move her legs because the damage was permanent. I had built my entire life around that belief. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because Emily asked us not to discuss certain aspects of her rehabilitation with you. I looked up. She asked you not to tell me? Yes. Why? Dr. Harris hesitated. She said she didn't want you to know until she was ready. I felt a strange mixture of anger and confusion. Ready for what? I don't know. He closed the file. There is more. I stared at him. Of course there is. Dr. Harris looked uncomfortable. Emily has occasionally shown voluntary movement during therapy. My heart dropped. What kind of movement? Small movements. Nothing dramatic, but enough to indicate that her nervous system may be responding better than expected. I shook my head. That can't be right. Why? Because she can't move her legs at home. Dr. Harris didn't answer. I suddenly remembered dozens of moments. Emily saying she couldn't reach something. Emily asking me to reposition her legs. Emily telling me she couldn't stand. Emily telling me she needed me. I had never questioned her. Not once. Dr. Harris watched me carefully. Daniel, I don't want you to jump to conclusions. What am I supposed to think? I don't know why she has behaved this way. But she can move? Potentially. I stood up. Does she know? Yes. The room became silent. She knows? Dr. Harris nodded. She has been told that her neurological function is better than initially expected. I stared at him. Then the question escaped my mouth. Why would she hide that from me? I can't answer that. I left the hospital in a daze. The entire drive home, my mind kept returning to one thought. Emily knew. She knew there was a possibility she could recover. And she never told me. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she didn't trust the doctors. Maybe she had tried to move and failed. Maybe she didn't want false hope. I gave her every possible excuse. But another question kept coming back. Why had she continued letting me do everything? When I arrived home, Emily was sitting in the living room with Linda. She looked up when I walked through the door. You're home early. I nodded. Linda immediately noticed something was wrong. Are you okay? I need to talk to Emily. Linda looked between us. Should I give you some privacy? Yes. After Linda left, Emily looked at me. What happened? I sat across from her. I went to see Dr. Harris. Her expression changed immediately. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. What did he tell you? That question was all the confirmation I needed. You already know. She looked down. I felt my chest tighten. Emily. She remained silent. Can you move your legs? Her eyes filled with tears. Daniel, can you? She whispered, sometimes. I stood up. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Sometimes. She nodded. How long? She didn't answer. How long, Emily? Almost a year. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Almost a year? She nodded again. I stepped away from her. You've been able to move your legs for almost a year? Not normally. That isn't what I asked. She wiped her tears. I can move them sometimes. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at me. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That if you knew, everything would change. I stared at her. Everything already changed. She began crying. I didn't know how to stop. Stop what? This. She looked around the room. Our life. I shook my head. You could have told me. I know. You watched me destroy myself. I never wanted you to. Then why didn't you stop me? She couldn't answer. I felt anger rising inside me. 3 years, Emily. I know. I gave up everything. I know. I thought you couldn't move. I know. And you knew there was a chance? She covered her face. I was scared. I walked toward the window. You keep saying you're scared. Because I am. I turned around. What exactly are you scared of? She looked at me through tears. That if I get better, you won't need me anymore. I stared at her. What? She swallowed. Before the accident, I was independent. I had my career, my own money, my own friends. I didn't need anyone. Then suddenly, I needed you for everything. And you stayed. That was love. I know. Then why would you think I'd leave if you recovered? Because I saw how much you loved being needed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You thought I wanted you helpless? No. But that's what you just said. I thought you would realize that without me needing you, you wouldn't love me the same way. I shook my head. That doesn't make any sense. It did to me. She looked down. After the accident, you became my entire world. You were always there. You made me feel safe. Then one day during therapy, I moved my foot. I froze. What? She nodded. It was tiny, barely anything, but I felt it. What happened? I didn't tell anyone at first. Why? Because I was terrified. She explained that after that first movement, she secretly began testing herself. Sometimes she could move her toes. Sometimes she could slightly tighten the muscles in her legs. The progress was inconsistent, and she became obsessed with the possibility that she might eventually regain more movement. But instead of telling me, I said, "You hit it." She nodded. "I didn't know what would happen if you found out. You could have asked me. I was afraid you'd leave." I laughed bitterly. "You thought I'd leave because you might walk again?" She started crying. "I thought you'd stop loving me." I sat down. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been haunting me. "Was that why you called me your servant?" She closed her eyes. "Yes." My chest tightened. "Explain." She wiped her tears. "If I convinced myself that you stayed because you were obligated to take care of me, then I didn't have to believe you stayed because you loved me." I stared at her. "That is the most twisted thing I've ever heard." "I know. And you thought insulting me would make it easier?" "No." "Then what?" "I thought if you became angry enough, you'd leave." I couldn't believe it. "You wanted me to leave?" "No." She looked at me. "I wanted to know if you'd stay even when I pushed you away." I sat in silence. Her words explained some things, but they didn't erase the damage. "You tested me." She nodded. "For 3 years." "Yes." "And when I finally stopped, you panicked." "Yes." I looked down at my hands. I didn't know whether I wanted to forgive her or walk out. Then she said something that changed everything. "There is one more thing." I looked up. "What?" She hesitated. "The accident wasn't entirely random." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" She looked terrified. "The driver who hit me." She paused. "He wasn't a stranger." I stared at her. "Who was he?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Someone from my past." I stood slowly. "Who?" She whispered a name, and the moment I heard it, I realized this wasn't just a story about a woman who had hidden her recovery. It was a story about a secret that had existed long before the accident. And somehow, I had been living inside it for 3 years without knowing the truth. The name Emily whispered stayed in my mind as I stood across from her. It was Ryan Mitchell. I knew that name. Everyone in our town knew it. Ryan had been Emily's fiancé before me. Not boyfriend. Not some casual relationship. Her fiancé. The man she had been engaged to for almost a year before their relationship ended suddenly. Emily had told me they had broken up because Ryan was controlling and dishonest. She had said she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. I had never met him. By the time Emily and I started dating, Ryan had supposedly moved to another state. I never asked too many questions because Emily rarely talked about him. Now she was telling me that the driver who caused her accident had been Ryan. I stared at her. "You knew who hit you?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yes." "And you never told me?" "No." "Why?" She looked down at her hands. "Because I was afraid of what you'd do." I felt anger rise inside me. "What would I do?" "You'd want to confront him." "Maybe I would." "He disappeared before the police could question him properly." I frowned. "Disappeared?" Emily nodded. "He left the state." I paced across the room. "Emily, you told me the police believe the accident was caused by someone who ran a red light." "They did. But they didn't know it was Ryan?" "They suspected it." "Then why didn't you tell me?" She looked at me. "Because Ryan called me before the police arrived." I stopped walking. "What did he say?" Emily's face became pale. "He said it was an accident. And he told me I needed to forget about him." I stared at her. "Why would he say that?" "I don't know." "You must have known something." She shook her head. I didn't believe her. "Not completely." "Emily, there has to be more." She looked away. "There is." I waited. She finally spoke. "Ryan had been contacting me for months before the accident." My stomach tightened. "Why?" "He wanted to get back together." "And you refused?" "Yes." "Then what happened?" "He became angry." "How angry?" "Enough that I changed my phone number." I stared at her. "You never told me." I was embarrassed. "You should have told me." "I know." She wiped her tears. "I thought it was over." "But it wasn't." "No." She looked toward the window. "The night before the accident, Ryan came to my workplace." I felt my chest tighten. "What did he want?" "He said he knew I was seeing someone." "You." She nodded. "He asked me who you were." I stood silently. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing." "And the next day, He hit my car. Neither of us spoke. The room felt suddenly smaller. I wanted to believe it had been a coincidence. A terrible coincidence. But too many things didn't fit. Did the police investigate him? Yes. And they couldn't prove he intentionally caused the accident. I looked at her. Because he claimed he lost control. She nodded. And you believed him? No. Then why did you stay silent? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Because I was afraid. Again. That word. Afraid. But this time, I understood. She hadn't only been afraid of losing me. She had been afraid of Ryan. I sat down. Where is he now? I don't know. You haven't heard from him? She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. You have. She looked at me. Once. When? About 6 months ago. My heart started pounding. What did he say? Emily swallowed. He said he knew you were taking care of me. I felt a cold sensation move through my body. How? I don't know. Did he threaten you? She nodded. What did he say? He said. She stopped. What? He said that if I ever tried to expose him, he'd make sure you regretted staying with me. I couldn't believe it. You wanted me to leave? No. She looked at me. I wanted to know if you'd stay even when I pushed you away. I sat in silence. Her words explained some things, but they didn't erase the damage. You tested me. She nodded. For 3 years. Yes. And when I finally stopped, you panicked. Yes. I looked down at my hands. I didn't know whether I wanted to forgive her or walk out. Then she said something that changed everything. There is one more thing. I looked up. What? She hesitated. The accident wasn't entirely random. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? She looked terrified. The driver who hit me. She paused. He wasn't a stranger. I stared at her. Who was he? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Someone from my past. I stood slowly. Who? She whispered a name, and the moment I heard it, I realized this wasn't just a story about a woman who had hidden her recovery. It was a story about a secret that had existed long before the accident. And somehow, I had been living inside it for 3 years without knowing the truth. The name Emily whispered stayed in my mind as I stood across from her. It was Ryan Mitchell. I knew that name. Everyone in our town knew it. Ryan had been Emily's fiancé before me. Not boyfriend. Not some casual relationship. Her fiancé. The man she had been engaged to for almost a year before their relationship ended suddenly. Emily had told me they had broken up because Ryan was controlling and dishonest. She had said she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. I had never met him. By the time Emily and I started dating, Ryan had supposedly moved to another state. I never asked too many questions because Emily rarely talked about him. Now she was telling me that the driver who caused her accident had been Ryan. I stared at her. You knew who hit you? Emily nodded slowly. Yes. And you never told me? No. Why? She looked down at her hands. Because I was afraid of what you'd do. I felt anger rise inside me. What would I do? You'd want to confront him. Maybe I would. He disappeared before the police could question him properly. I frowned. Disappeared? Emily nodded. He left the state. I paced across the room. Emily, you told me the police believed the accident was caused by someone who ran a red light. They did. But they didn't know it was Ryan? They suspected it. Then why didn't you tell me? She looked at me. Because Ryan called me before the police arrived. I stopped walking. What did he say? Emily's face became pale. He said it was an accident. And he told me I needed to forget about him. I stared at her. Why would he say that? I don't know. You must have known something. She shook her head. I didn't believe her. Not completely. Emily, there has to be more. She looked away. There is. I waited. She finally spoke. Ryan had been contacting me for months before the accident. My stomach tightened. Why? He wanted to get back together. And you refused? Yes. Then what happened? He became angry. How angry? Enough that I changed my phone number. I stared at her. You never told me. I was embarrassed. You should have told me. I know. She wiped her tears. I thought it was over. But it wasn't. No. She looked toward the window. The night before the accident, Ryan came to my workplace. I felt my chest tighten. What did he want? He said he knew I was seeing someone. You. She nodded. He asked me who you were. I stood silently. What did you tell him? Nothing. And the next day, he hit my car. Neither of us spoke. The room felt suddenly smaller. I wanted to believe it had been a coincidence. A terrible coincidence. But too many things didn't fit. Did the police investigate him? Yes. And they couldn't prove he intentionally caused the accident. I looked at her. Because he claimed he lost control. She nodded. And you believed him? No. Then why did you stay silent? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Because I was afraid. Again. That word. Afraid. But this time, I understood. She hadn't only been afraid of losing me. She had been afraid of Ryan. I sat down. Where is he now? I don't know. You haven't heard from him? She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. You have. She looked at me. Once. When? About 6 months ago. My heart started pounding. What did he say? Emily swallowed. He said he knew you were taking care of me. I felt a cold sensation move through my body. How? I don't know. Did he threaten you? She nodded. What did he say? He said. She stopped. What? He said that if I ever tried to expose him, he'd make sure you regretted staying with me.